I always thought the only thing contagious in this house was my wife's snoring. Turns out, adultery spreads faster than a hospital superbug. My name is Miles Conrad, and I'm 44 years old with the kind of job that makes people's eyes glaze over at parties. I'm a biomedical lab technician at St. Mary's Hospital in suburban Massachusetts. I fix the machines that keep people alive, calibrate the equipment that diagnoses their diseases, and maintain the computers that store their secrets. It's not glamorous work, but it pays the bills and keeps me busy during the day shift while my wife Talia works nights in the ER. Or at least, that's what I thought she was doing. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The rain drummed against our bedroom window at 3 a.m. when I heard her key in the front door. Again. Talia had been pulling these marathon shifts for months now, coming home at dawn with that particular exhaustion that comes from saving lives and dealing with medical emergencies. Her scrubs always smelled like antiseptic and stress, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, her brown eyes rimmed with fatigue. "Long night?" I mumbled as she slipped into bed beside me. "You have no idea," she whispered, but there was something different in her voice, a breathiness that hadn't been there before. Dr. Holcroft had me running all over the hospital, 3 cardiac arrests, 2 overdoses, and a car accident that kept us busy until 2 a.m. Dr. Wade Holcroft. She'd been mentioning his name a lot lately. The new ER attending physician who'd transferred from Boston General 6 months ago. 42 years old, married, and according to the hospital gossip I'd picked up in the cafeteria, he had a reputation for being both brilliant and charming. The kind of doctor who could save your life and make you feel grateful for the privilege. "Sounds rough," I said, trying to keep the suspicion out of my voice. Talia rolled over, facing away from me. "Miles, I need you to understand something. This job is demanding. Dr. Holcroft expects excellence from his nurses, and that means being available when he needs us. Sometimes that means staying late, sometimes it means coming in early. You'll have to accept that." There it was, the speech I'd been dreading, the one that sounded rehearsed, like she'd been practicing it in her car on the drive home. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the rain, and wondered when my wife had started talking about her job like it was a religious calling and Dr. Holcroft was the Messiah. The next morning, I found a receipt in the pocket of her scrubs while doing laundry. The Marriott downtown, room service for 2, champagne and strawberries at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night when she told me she was working a double shift. I sat on the edge of our bed, holding that piece of paper like it was a final verdict. In a way, it was. The final verdict for my marriage. That's when I decided to do what I do best. Investigate, analyze, and fix what's broken. The only problem was, I wasn't sure this particular machine could be repaired. You'd think after 15 years of fixing broken lab machines, I could fix a marriage. Turns out, I'm better with wires than hearts. The hospital where I work is a maze of corridors, departments, and gossip networks that would make the CIA jealous. As a lab tech, I have access to most areas, and more importantly, I'm invisible. People don't notice the guy in the blue uniform who maintains their equipment. They talk around me like I'm furniture. That's how I learned about the midnight rounds. I was calibrating an analyzer in the ER break room when I overheard 2 nurses talking. Natasha Evans, Talia's best friend at work, was holding court with her usual audience of younger nurses, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I'm telling you, Sarah, some of these doctors think the on-call room is their personal playground," Tash said, stirring her coffee with exaggerated innocence. "Dr. Holcroft especially. He's got this thing about private consultations with certain nurses." "What kind of consultations?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide. Tash giggled. "The kind that require dimmed lights and locked doors. And let's just say the patient isn't the only one getting their pulse checked." The other nurses erupted in laughter, but I felt my pressure spike. I kept my head down, focusing on my calibration readings, but every word burned into my memory. "Poor Sandra Holcroft," another nurse chimed in. "She has no idea her husband is playing doctor after hours." "What she doesn't know won't hurt her," Tash replied. "Besides, some of us know how to appreciate a doctor's attention properly." I finished my work and left the break room, but the conversation haunted me. That night, when Talia came home at dawn again, I noticed things I'd been blind to before. The way she checked her phone constantly, how she'd started buying new perfume and wearing it to work, the fact that she'd been doing her hair and makeup before her shifts, something she'd never bothered with in our 12 years of marriage. I needed proof. Not suspicions, not overheard gossip, but cold, hard evidence. That's when I remembered the audio relay system we used in the lab for remote monitoring. Small, wireless, and virtually undetectable. I'd installed dozens of them on equipment throughout the hospital. Installing one on my wife's phone would be child's play. The opportunity came 3 days later when Talia was in the shower. Her phone sat on the nightstand, charging. It took me less than 2 minutes to attach the tiny device to the inside of her phone case and sync it to my laptop. I felt like a criminal, but I also felt like a man who was about to discover the truth about his life. The first recording came that evening. Talia was at work, and I was in my home office, supposedly reviewing equipment manuals. Instead, I was listening to my wife's voice through my headphones, praying I wouldn't hear what I expected to hear. I heard it anyway. "Wade, you need to be more careful." Talia's voice was soft, intimate. "Miles is starting to ask questions about my schedule." "Let him ask," a man's voice replied. Smooth, confident, Dr. Wade Holcroft. "What's he going to do? Follow you to work?" They laughed together, and the sound cut through me like a scalpel. "I'm serious," Talia continued. "Maybe we should cool it for a while. Find somewhere else to meet." "The on-call room has been working fine," Wade said. "Besides, I like the risk. Makes it more exciting." "You're terrible," Talia giggled. "What if someone catches us?" "They won't. And even if they did, who's going to report the head of emergency medicine? Tash certainly won't say anything, not after I got her that promotion to charge nurse." My hands were shaking as I paused the recording. Tash knew. She wasn't just gossiping about random doctors and nurses. She was covering for my wife. The recording continued for another 20 minutes. I learned about their first kiss in the supply closet, their first time in the on-call room, how Wade had been padding Talia's overtime hours so they could afford nicer hotels, how they joked about keeping the husband happy while they planned their next rendezvous. By the time the recording ended, I was numb. Not angry, not hurt, just empty. I sat in my office until dawn, staring at my computer screen, listening to the rain against the window. When Talia came home, she found me exactly where she'd left me. "You're up early," she said, kissing the top of my head like nothing had changed. "Couldn't sleep," I replied, which was true. I didn't think I'd ever sleep soundly again. She disappeared into the bathroom, and I heard the shower start. While she washed away the evidence of her betrayal, I began planning my response. I've seen petri dishes with more ethics than these two. The beauty of being a lab tech is that you learn to be methodical. You document everything, you verify your results, and you don't act on incomplete data. So for the next 2 weeks, I collected evidence like I was building a case for the FDA. I recorded every conversation. I photographed every receipt I found in Talia's pockets. I tracked her location using the family GPS app on our phones, cross-referencing her claimed work schedule with her actual whereabouts. The picture that emerged was devastating in its clarity. My wife was billing overtime hours while having an affair with her boss in hotel rooms across the city. She was using our joint credit card to pay for dinners and gifts for her lover. She was lying to my face every single day while her best friend helped cover her tracks. But the most damaging evidence came from an unexpected source, Wade himself. During one of their recorded conversations, he mentioned something that made me freeze. "I've been thinking about our long-term situation," Wade said. "Sandra's been suspicious lately, asking questions about my schedule. And honestly, sneaking around is getting old." "What are you saying?" Talia asked. "I'm saying maybe it's time to make some changes. Real changes. I could leave Sandra, you could leave Miles. We could start fresh somewhere else. I've got contacts at hospitals in California, Florida, places where we could build something together." There was a long pause before Talia responded. "Wade, that's a big step." "Is it? We're already living like we're together. The only difference would be making it official. Think about it, Talia. No more sneaking around, no more lies, no more dealing with spouses who don't understand what we do." "Miles isn't that bad," Talia said, but her voice lacked conviction. Wade laughed. "He's a lab tech, honey. He fixes machines. You save lives." "I save lives. We're on a completely different level than him. You deserve someone who understands your world." That conversation happened on a Thursday night. By Friday morning, I'd made my decision. I called in sick to work and spent the day implementing my plan. First, I opened a new checking account at a different bank and had my paycheck redirected there. Then, I rented a storage unit and began quietly moving my personal belongings out of the house. Not everything, just the things that mattered. My tools, my books, my computer equipment, and the few family photos that didn't include Talia. But the most important part of my plan required a trip to the hospital. I arrived at St. Mary's during the evening shift change, when the corridors were busy with staff transitioning between day and night duties. I knew Talia would be in the ER, and I knew Wade would be there too. What I needed was photographic evidence of their relationship that couldn't be explained away as coincidence. I positioned myself in the parking garage with a clear view of the staff entrance. At 11:30 p.m., just as I'd expected based on their recorded conversations, Talia and Wade emerged together. They thought they were alone, hidden between the concrete pillars and parked cars. Wade pulled an envelope from his jacket and handed it to Talia. Even from my hiding spot behind a maintenance van, I could see it was thick with cash. She counted it quickly, then stood on her tiptoes to kiss him, not a friendly peck on the cheek, but a full, passionate kiss that lasted long enough for me to take a dozen photos. I was so focused on getting the perfect shot that I almost didn't notice the security guard walking his rounds. His flashlight beam swept across the garage, and I ducked behind the van just as it passed over my position. My heart was pounding as I waited for him to move on. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, hiding in a hospital parking garage like some kind of private investigator, gathering evidence of my wife's affair. 6 months ago, the most exciting thing in my life was calibrating a new spectrometer. Now I was conducting surveillance operations and recording secret conversations. The security guard's footsteps echoed off the concrete as he moved toward the far end of the garage. I seized my chance and slipped out from behind the van, heading for the stairwell. But as I reached for the door handle, I heard voices approaching from the other side. "Told you, we need to be more careful," Wade was saying. "You're paranoid," Talia replied. "Miles doesn't suspect anything. He's too wrapped up in his little machines to notice what's happening in the real world." I pressed myself against the wall next to the stairwell door, my camera clutched in my sweating hands. They were going to walk right past me. "Still," Wade continued, "maybe we should consider that California opportunity sooner rather than later. Get out of here before anyone starts asking uncomfortable questions." "You mean before Sandra finds out," Talia said. "Sandra's not the problem. She's too dependent on me to cause real trouble. It's your husband I'm worried about. Lab techs are detail-oriented people. If he starts paying attention..." They passed by without seeing me, their voices fading as they headed toward their cars. I waited until I heard 2 engines start and 2 sets of tires squeal on the concrete before I finally breathed again. As I drove home, I realized something had changed inside me. The hurt and betrayal were still there, but they'd been joined by something else. Anger. Cold, calculating anger. Wade thought I was just a lab tech who fixed machines and didn't understand the real world. Talia thought I was too wrapped up in my work to notice her lies. They were about to learn that being detail-oriented and methodical weren't weaknesses. They were weapons. Nothing says romance like exchanging bodily fluids and pay stubs. I spent the weekend organizing my evidence into a comprehensive dossier. Photos, audio recordings, credit card statements, GPS tracking data, and a detailed timeline of Talia's lies. It read like a case study in workplace harassment and timesheet fraud. Monday morning, I walked into the hospital's Human Resources Department at exactly 9 a.m., carrying a manila folder that would detonate like a bomb in the middle of Talia's carefully constructed double life. Margaret Hoffman, the HR director, was a stern woman in her 50s who took hospital policy violations as personally as attacks on her family. She listened to my presentation with increasing alarm, her face growing paler with each piece of evidence I presented. "Mr. Conrad," she said when I finished, "these are very serious allegations. If what you're telling me is true, we're looking at multiple policy violations, falsification of timesheets, abuse of authority, workplace harassment, and potentially fraud." "I understand the gravity of the situation," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "That's why I wanted to bring it to your attention immediately." She studied the photos of Wade handing Talia the cash envelope. "This appears to show Dr. Holcroft paying your wife directly. Do you have any idea what this money was for?" "Based on the recorded conversations, I believe he's been compensating her for overtime hours that she didn't actually work, allowing them to use that money for their personal relationship." Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. "We'll need to conduct a full investigation. This will require interviews with both Dr. Holcroft and your wife, as well as anyone else who might have knowledge of their relationship." "I understand that Natasha Evans, the charge nurse in the ER, has been aware of and facilitating their meetings," I added. "Ms. Evans will be interviewed as well." Margaret gathered the evidence into a neat stack. "Mr. Conrad, I want you to know that we take these matters very seriously. No one is above hospital policy, regardless of their position. I left the HR office feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Phase 1 of my plan was complete. Now I had to prepare for Phase 2. That evening, I waited in the hospital parking garage again. Not to gather more evidence this time, but to have a conversation. Wade emerged from the staff entrance at 11:45 p.m., walking toward his silver BMW with the confidence of a man who believed he was untouchable. He was about to learn otherwise. "Dr. Holcroft," I called out, stepping from behind a concrete pillar. He spun around, his hand instinctively reaching for his phone. When he saw me, confusion replaced alarm on his face. "Do I know you?" "Miles Conrad, Talia's husband. I think it's time we had a chat." His expression shifted to something between guilt and annoyance. "Look, Mr. Conrad, I don't know what you think you know, but I know about the on-call room," I interrupted. "I know about the hotels. I know about the cash payments and the falsified overtime. I know everything, Wade." He took a step back, his eyes darting around the empty garage. "You're making some pretty serious accusations without any proof." I pulled out my phone and played 30 seconds of audio. His voice and Talia's, discussing their next rendezvous in explicit detail. His face went white. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued, keeping my voice calm and reasonable. "Tomorrow morning, HR is going to call you in for a meeting. You're going to tell them the truth about your relationship with my wife. All of it." "You're insane," Wade said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Even if what you're suggesting were true, you can't prove anything." I smiled and pulled a small bucket from behind the pillar. It was filled with used latex gloves from the lab, along with some creative additions: fake vomit from the pediatric ward's Halloween supplies, food coloring, and enough corn syrup to make it realistically disgusting. "You're right," I said. "I can't prove you're a cheating scumbag in court, but I can prove it to everyone who matters." Before he could react, I dumped the entire contents of the bucket through his BMW's open sunroof. The mixture splattered across his leather seats, dashboard, and center console, creating a biohazard nightmare that would cost thousands to clean. Wade lunged toward me, his face twisted with rage. "You son of a—" "Careful, doctor," I said, pulling out my phone again. This time I was recording video. "Assault charges would look terrible on your medical license review." He stopped short, breathing heavily. Around us, the parking garage was silent, except for the drip of fake vomit slowly pooling on his floorboards. "You have no idea who you're messing with," Wade said through gritted teeth. "Actually, I do." I lowered my phone and looked him straight in the eye. "I'm messing with a man who thinks his medical degree makes him untouchable, a man who's been stealing from the hospital and manipulating my wife, a man who's about to lose everything." I turned and walked away, leaving him standing next to his ruined car. Behind me, I heard him shouting threats and obscenities, but I didn't look back. Phase 2 was complete. She treats guilt like Tylenol. Just take 2 and hope it goes away. The hospital erupted the next morning like a medical drama come to life. By 10 a.m., Wade and Talia had both been called into emergency meetings with HR. By noon, the gossip network was in overdrive. By evening, everyone knew that the golden boy of the ER and his favorite nurse were in serious trouble. I heard about it from my boss, Jim Martinez, who cornered me in the lab supply room with barely contained excitement. "Miles, did you hear about Dr. Holcroft and your wife?" he asked, his eyes wide with scandal-hungry glee. "What about them?" I replied, maintaining my innocent expression. "They're both suspended pending investigation, something about falsified timesheets and inappropriate workplace relationships. Margaret Hoffman looked like she was ready to call the police when she came down to ask about our security camera coverage." I nodded thoughtfully. "That's terrible. I hope it's all just a misunderstanding." Jim studied my face for a moment, then grinned. "Miles, you magnificent bastard. This was you, wasn't it?" "I have no idea what you're talking about," I said, but I couldn't suppress a small smile. "Good for you, man. That pompous ass had it coming. And Talia?" He shook his head. "I never would have guessed she had it in her." Neither would I thought, but I kept that to myself. The real fireworks started that evening when Talia came home. I was in the kitchen, making dinner for one, when she burst through the front door like a hurricane. "Miles!" she screamed, her voice echoing through the house. "What did you do?" I looked up from my pasta with studied calm. "Hello, Talia. How was work? Oh, wait, that's right. You don't have work anymore." She stormed into the kitchen, her face flushed with anger and panic. "Don't you dare act innocent. I know this was you. The recordings, the photos, all of it. How could you do this to me?" "How could I do this to you?" I repeated, setting down my fork. "Talia, you've been cheating on me for months. You've been stealing from the hospital. You've been lying to my face every single day. And you want to know how I could expose it?" "It wasn't stealing," she protested. "Wade was just helping me get the overtime I deserved. I work harder than anyone else in that ER." "You work harder. Is that what you call screwing your boss in the on-call room? Because I have audio recordings that suggest your job duties have expanded significantly beyond patient care." She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "You recorded me? You violated my privacy? You spied on me like some kind of stalker." "I investigated my wife's suspicious behavior and discovered she was committing adultery and fraud. If you want to call that stalking, go ahead. The divorce attorney I hired yesterday found it very compelling evidence. The word divorce hit her like a physical blow. She sank into a kitchen chair, her anger replaced by panic. Miles, please. We can work this out. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. Wade took advantage of me, manipulated me. I never meant for it to go this far. A moment of weakness that lasted 6 months and involved falsifying hospital records? I was confused. The stress of the job, the long hours, Wade paying attention to me when you never did. It felt good to be appreciated, to be valued by someone who understood what I do. I stared at her, this woman I'd been married to for 12 years, and realized I was looking at a stranger. So this is my fault? I didn't appreciate you enough, so you decided to commit adultery and fraud? That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. You're going to blame everyone except yourself. Wade manipulated you. I didn't appreciate you. The job was stressful. Everyone's responsible except Talia. She started crying then, the kind of desperate tears that come when someone realizes their world is collapsing. Please, Miles, I'll do anything. I'll quit nursing. We can move somewhere else, start over. Just don't leave me. Don't destroy our marriage over this. I didn't destroy our marriage, Talia. You did. The moment you decided that Dr. Wade Holcroft was worth more than 12 years of vows. I stood up and walked toward the stairs, leaving her sobbing at the kitchen table. Your clothes are packed in the guest room. I suggest you find somewhere else to stay tonight. Tomorrow you can come back for the rest of your things, but I want you out of this house. Miles, wait. She followed me to the bottom of the stairs. What about Wade? Are you going to destroy him too? I paused on the third step and looked back at her. Wade destroyed himself. I just documented it. He has a family, children. His wife doesn't deserve this. Neither did I replied. But that didn't stop you from doing it anyway. The next morning, I woke up alone in my house for the first time in over a decade. It should have felt empty, depressing. Instead, it felt clean. Maybe next time, check your own pulse before you cheat. 3 weeks later, the hospital's annual charity gala was scheduled to proceed as planned, despite the scandal that had rocked the medical staff. The event was held at the Grand Ballroom downtown, a marble and crystal palace where the city's medical elite gathered to pat themselves on the back and raise money for underprivileged patients. I wasn't invited, of course. Lab techs don't rate charity gala invitations, but I bought a ticket anyway, along with a tuxedo that cost more than my monthly car payment. Through the hospital gossip network, I'd learned that both Talia and Wade planned to attend. Their lawyers had advised them to maintain a normal public presence while fighting their suspensions. They wanted to show the medical community that they were victims of a vindictive spouse's false accusations. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The ballroom was packed with doctors, nurses, administrators, and wealthy donors. Crystal chandeliers cast elegant light over men in tuxedos and women in evening gowns. A small orchestra played classical music while servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I spotted Talia near the bar, wearing a red dress I'd never seen before and talking animatedly with Natasha Evans. She looked beautiful, confident, like a woman who believed she was going to weather this storm and come out stronger. Wade was across the room, surrounded by colleagues and donors, playing the role of the dedicated physician wrongly accused. His wife Sandra stood beside him, smiling tightly, playing the supportive spouse despite the rumors that had to be eating her alive. The evening's program included a silent auction, dinner, and speeches from hospital administrators about the importance of community support. The highlight was supposed to be a presentation about the new cardiac wing, complete with a large video screen that would show the planned facility. I had other plans for that screen. During the cocktail hour, I made my way to the audiovisual booth at the back of the ballroom. The technician running the equipment was a kid, maybe 25, who looked bored out of his mind. "Excuse me," I said, showing him my hospital ID badge. "I'm Miles Conrad from the biomedical department. There's been a last-minute change to the presentation. I need to upload some additional files." He looked at my badge, then at the USB drive in my hand. Nobody told me about any changes. It just came down from administration, some new footage of the cardiac wing construction that they want to include. I handed him a $20 bill along with the USB drive. "It'll just take a minute to load." The kid pocketed the money and plugged in my drive. "What files do you want me to add?" "There's a folder labeled Cardiac Wing Update. Just cue it up after the main presentation." He nodded and began copying files while I watched the crowd below. Talia had moved to a table near the front, still chatting with Natasha and several other nurses. Wade was glad-handing donors, his charm turned up to maximum wattage. "All set," the technician said, handing back my USB drive. The new files are loaded and ready to go. Perfect. Thanks for your help. I made my way back into the crowd and found a spot near the stage where I'd have a clear view of everyone's reactions. The lights dimmed as the hospital administrator took the podium to begin the evening's program. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight for St. Mary's annual charity gala. Your support makes it possible for us to provide world-class medical care to our entire community. I tuned out the opening remarks, focusing instead on Talia and Wade. They were seated at different tables, maintaining the pretense that they were nothing more than professional colleagues. Talia kept glancing around the room nervously, as if she sensed something was wrong but couldn't identify the threat. The administrator finished his speech and introduced the cardiac wing presentation. The lights dimmed further as the video screen came to life, showing architectural renderings and construction footage. This new facility will house state-of-the-art equipment and provide our patients with the finest cardiac care available anywhere in New England, the narrator explained over images of gleaming medical equipment and spacious patient rooms. I checked my watch. In 30 seconds, my additional footage would begin playing. 20 seconds, 10 seconds. The screen flickered, and suddenly the architectural renderings were replaced by a very different kind of footage. Audio began playing through the ballroom's sound system, crystal clear and loud enough for everyone to hear. Wade, you need to be more careful. Miles is starting to ask questions about my schedule. Let him ask. What's he going to do? Follow you to work? The room erupted in confused murmurs as people tried to figure out what they were hearing. On screen, photos began cycling through. Wade handing Talia the cash envelope, the two of them kissing in the parking garage, credit card receipts from hotels and restaurants. I like the risk. Makes it more exciting, Wade's voice continued through the sound system. You're terrible. What if someone catches us? They won't. And even if they did, who's going to report the head of emergency medicine? The murmurs turned to gasps as people realized what they were witnessing. All eyes turned toward Wade and Talia, who sat frozen at their respective tables like deer in headlights. But I wasn't finished. The photos were replaced by documentation, falsified timesheets showing Talia billing overtime while GPS data proved she was at hotels with Wade, bank records showing cash deposits that corresponded to their meetings, text messages discussing their plans to leave their spouses and move to California together. We're already living like we're together. The only difference would be making it official, Wade's voice declared to the horrified audience. That's when Talia snapped. She leapt from her chair and rushed toward the stage, screaming, "Turn it off! Turn it off right now!" But the presentation continued, now showing the most damaging evidence. Recordings of Wade bragging about manipulating hospital schedules, Talia laughing about deceiving me, and both of them mocking their respective spouses. Miles is too wrapped up in his little machines to notice what's happening in the real world, Wade's voice proclaimed while the screen displayed photos of their hotel rendezvous. I stepped forward, moving toward the stage as Talia reached the podium. The hospital administrator stood there in shock, unsure how to respond to the chaos erupting around him. "Ladies and gentlemen," I called out, my voice carrying clearly through the ballroom's acoustics. "I'm Miles Conrad, the lab tech who's apparently too wrapped up in his little machines to understand the real world." All eyes turned toward me as I walked calmly through the crowd. Talia spotted me, and her face contorted with rage. "You!" she screamed, pointing at me like I was the villain in this story. "You did this. You humiliated me in front of everyone." "I didn't humiliate you, Talia," I replied, reaching the stage. "I just showed everyone who you really are." She lunged at me then, her composure completely shattered. Her fingernails raked across my cheek as she screamed obscenities and threats. The crowd gasped and pulled out their phones, recording every moment of her breakdown. Security guards rushed forward to restrain her, but she fought them like a wild animal, her elegant red dress tearing as she struggled. "You destroyed my life," she shrieked. "You destroyed everything." "No," I said, touching the scratches on my cheek. "You destroyed your life. I just documented it." Wade had also stood up, his face pale and his hands shaking. His wife Sandra was staring at him with a mixture of horror and disgust, finally understanding the full extent of his betrayal. The presentation continued playing in the background, cycling through more evidence, more recordings, more proof of their systematic deception. The ballroom had descended into chaos, with guests talking loudly, security guards struggling with Talia, and hospital administrators trying desperately to regain control. I walked to the microphone and tapped it gently. The sound echoed through the room, drawing everyone's attention back to me. "Dr. Holcroft thought I was just a lab tech who fixed machines and didn't understand his world," I said, my voice calm and clear despite the mayhem around me. "He was wrong. I understand his world perfectly. I understand that he's a predator who abuses his authority to manipulate vulnerable employees. I understand that he's a thief who steals from the hospital to fund his affairs, and I understand that he's a coward who destroys families for his own gratification. Wade started toward the stage, his face flushed with anger, but several doctors blocked his path. His colleagues, the same people who had been laughing at his jokes an hour earlier, now looked at him with disgust and contempt. As for my wife, I continued, she made her choice. She chose to betray our marriage, steal from her employer, and lie to everyone who trusted her. Tonight, she has to live with the consequences of those choices. The security guards were finally dragging Talia toward the exit, her screams echoing off the marble walls. Wade was being escorted out as well, his wife Sandra following behind him, her face a mask of cold fury. I looked out at the crowd of doctors, nurses, and administrators who had witnessed the complete destruction of 2 careers, 2 marriages, and 2 reputations. Maybe next time, I said into the microphone, check your own pulse before you cheat. The ballroom erupted in a mixture of applause, shocked laughter, and continued chaos. Camera phones flashed as people recorded the aftermath of the most spectacular public humiliation in the hospital's history. I walked off the stage and through the crowd, ignoring the questions shouted at me by reporters and colleagues. Behind me, the presentation continued playing, ensuring that every piece of evidence would be seen and recorded by hundreds of witnesses. As I reached the ballroom exit, I turned back one last time. The elegant charity gala had become a crime scene of destroyed lives and shattered illusions. The marble floors were littered with abandoned champagne glasses and discarded programs. The crystal chandeliers cast their light over a room that would be talking about this night for years to come. Wade and Talia had wanted to show the medical community that they were victims of false accusations. Instead, they had shown everyone exactly who they really were. I walked out into the cool night air, loosened my bow tie, and headed home to my quiet house. Tomorrow, the hospital would be buzzing with gossip and speculation. Wade would be fired, his medical license under review. Talia would be blacklisted from every hospital in the state. Their marriages would be over, their careers destroyed, their reputations in ruins. But tonight, for the first time in months, I would sleep peacefully.